She screamed at me over balsamic vinegar in front of guests. That was the moment I stopped loving her. 6 months later, there were divorce papers under a salt shaker me on a plane to Lisbon. Her remarried in a fast vineyard wedding. Perfect until one guest's toast destroyed everything. Then she called me, screaming. I was 4,000 miles away, finally breathing. My name's Raymond Cole. I'm 54. 6 months ago, I did something most men my age only fantasize about on the morning commute. I divorced my wife of 28 years, liquidated everything I could fit into 2 suitcases, and moved to Lisbon, Portugal. No dramatic confrontation. No shouting match in the driveway. Just divorce papers under a coffee mug, my house keys on top, and a note that read, "Everything's yours. I'm gone." Back in Denver, I'd been a commercial real estate developer. Strip malls. Office complexes, the kind of buildings that make one city look like another. Good money, respect in the community, a beautiful house in Cherry Creek that Catherine decorated like a magazine spread. From the outside, we looked perfect. Inside, I was suffocating. Catherine worked luxury real estate. She sold multi-million-dollar homes to tech executives and oil money. Somewhere along the way, she began insisting our life matched the listings she sold. Granite countertops became marble. Marble had to be Italian. The Italian marble had to come from a quarry only 3 people in Colorado knew about. I stopped arguing around year 23. I started sleeping in my office around year 26. By year 28, I realized I was living with a stranger who happened to share my last name and our mortgage. We had 2 kids. Olivia is 27 now, an investigative journalist in Chicago. Sharp, skeptical, persistent. She saw through Catherine's act years before I found the courage to leave. Jason is 24, a junior investment banker in New York. Smart kid. But he'd bought into his mother's version of reality. He thought I was the problem. 3 months before I left, I had a heart attack. Minor, but real. The cardiologist said stress 14 times in one appointment. I drove home, listened to Catherine screaming on the phone about staging a property, and realized I could die in that house, and she wouldn't notice until someone pointed out. My body was blocking her walk-in closet. So I planned quietly and methodically. 6 months of restructuring assets into a family trust with Olivia as trustee. Properties refinanced and layered with loans Catherine never knew existed. Everything arranged so the house, the cars, and the furniture looked hers, along with the debt securing them. Legitimate on paper, strategically done. The morning I left, Denver was still dark. I parked in long-term at the airport and didn't look back. By the time Catherine found my note, I was somewhere over the Atlantic, drinking terrible airplane coffee and feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Peace, now. I wake to church bells in the Alfama Quarter. I drink espresso that tastes like something. I walk the Tagus River and watch ships go somewhere. I paint badly. I swim in the ocean. I've learned enough Portuguese to order wine and apologize for my terrible Portuguese. I hadn't spoken to Catherine since I left. I didn't check her social media. I assumed she'd grieve, rage, then find someone new. I was right. I learned she'd remarried from a DM. Danny Riker, college acquaintance, sent one line. Catherine's getting married. Vineyard, Napa. I read it twice. I felt curiosity like watching a movie you walked out of halfway through. The name rang. Bell. Kenneth Bradshaw. Flashy. Always in expensive suits. Different car every quarter. I pulled up Catherine's public Instagram. Engagement photos. Champagne sunsets that screamed Photoshop. Location tagged Seven Hills Vineyard. Date 3 weeks, something clicked. 15 years earlier, she and I had driven up to that vineyard. She'd hated it then, too quiet, too rustic. Now it was the stage for her new life. I opened archival files and found a brochure. Under event hosting specs in small print, outdoor venues may experience significant echo. Professional sound systems recommended for speeches and toasts. Test equipment advised. Perfect acoustics. Perfect timing. I called an old contact, Richard Peller, a caterer I'd helped years ago. He laughed low and said, "Consider it done. Not to cause a scene, not for revenge. Just to make sure one's speech landed where it needed to land. To make the wedding unforgettable for reasons Catherine hadn't planned for. Olivia called 2 days later. She never calls without reason. "Dad," she said. "No," I told her. "Catherine's getting married. Does Kenneth Bradshaw know about this?" "He does." I told her what I'd found. She'd been digging. Kenneth's expansion didn't match his revenue. Credit lines maxed. Former partner suing? Pattern looked wrong. Classic pyramid structure. Collapse in 3 or 4 months, she said. She told me she was flying to Napa. She wanted to support the new beginning and document it, not celebrate. She also told me Richard had added one guest, Clark Witherby, an elderly man with a story and a microphone slot. Olivia liked it old school, elegant. Jason called 3 days before the wedding. He was cold, formal. He told me he was standing up. He said Kenneth's a good guy and that he was proud of his mother. That stopped me cold. If he thought walking away was weakness, then his mother had taught him well. Rehearsal dinner updates came in like field reports. Catherine looked nervous. Kenneth was overcompensating. On the wedding day, Olivia texted photos. Vineyard draped in white, Catherine in an ivory gown. Everything staged. Jason's toast came through on the phone. "Kenneth Bradshaw is the kind of man we should all aspire to be," he said, voice amplified by excellent acoustics. Applause. Clinking glasses. Then Olivia called. Breathless. "Dad, Clark's up next." "I'm recording." Clark Witherby's voice carried across the vineyard like it was designed to. He opened by celebrating truth, foundations, and partnerships built on solid ground. He spoke plainly. He asked questions. How do you open 3 dealerships in 18 months without traditional financing? Why restructure credit lines every quarter? What happens when the music stops and everyone looks for a chair? He didn't accuse. He suggested that some things that shine are built on sand. The crowd went quiet. Catherine's face changed. You could hear collective oxygen thicken. Someone tried to cut the microphone, but the words were already in the air. Catherine ran outside. Kenneth went purple. Jason looked like he'd been hit by a truck. Half the room checked their phones. The other half pretended nothing happened. Olivia called again, breathless. "Dad, she's calling you." Catherine did call. She screamed that I'd planted a man to ruin her day. I told her I was in Portugal and had nothing to do with it. That speech was just someone asking the questions that should have been asked months ago. She called me names. I kept my voice calm. "Go back to your wedding," I said. "Smile for the cameras. Do what you do best. Perform." Then we hung up. By morning, the video was everywhere. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. 500,000 views by midday Lisbon time. 3 million by evening. The clip of Catherine's face the exact moment she realized became a meme. Think pieces followed. Business schools used the video as a case study on due diligence failures. Jason called. "They're auditing Kenneth's dealerships," he said. "There's a suit." His voice broke. The video would follow him forever. I told him Olivia had pulled public records. The pattern was there. He apologized for how he'd treated me. He said he'd been blind. 3 weeks later, Kenneth's dealerships filed for bankruptcy. The lawsuit became public. Investors screamed fraud. Catherine's firm started taking calls. Her name trended in headlines. Wife of a disgraced businessman. Her office asked her to take a leave of absence. Client calls dropped by 70% in a week. Creditors came after Catherine. They claimed she'd benefited from transfers and gifts during the brief marriage. She swore she didn't know. The document said otherwise. They asked for $280,000 plus fees. She didn't have it. The house I'd left her was underwater. The refinances I'd put in motion before I left meant she was trapped. I refused to loan her money. She called me heartless. "Family helps family," she said. Olivia and I saw it differently. Olivia reminded her mother that trust without verification gets people burned. Kenneth vanished. There was speculation he'd fled to Brazil or Costa Rica. He was indicted on 17 counts of investor fraud months later and ultimately sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Victims recovered about 30 cents on the dollar. The dealerships were liquidated. Catherine filed bankruptcy. She sold the Cherry Creek house at a loss and moved into a small apartment she called transitional. When she still had clients to impress, her real estate license was suspended pending ethics inquiries. She ended up working retail. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired and grateful. Grateful I'd walked away when I did. Grateful the heart attack had been a warning instead of an ending. Life in Lisbon kept me. I painted more. I swam more. I met Isabel, 50, who owned a tiny bookshop in Alfama. She recommended Portuguese poetry and didn't Google my past. She accepted me for who I was now. She was widowed. She knew what it meant to rebuild. We compared notes like two architects talking foundations. When you build a second time, you know what actually holds weight. Jason recovered. His firm reassigned him, then promoted him back after his judgment proved itself. He called every Sunday. He started therapy. He began to ask the hard questions he should have asked years ago. Olivia kept winning awards for investigations into corporate fraud. She told me I'd taught her to look for gaps between what people claim and what they can prove. She called my quiet exit the bravest thing she'd ever seen. Months turned into a new normal. Catherine faded from the spotlight. The viral video became a permanent record of choice and consequence. For me, life grew quieter and truer. Isabel and I watched the tea turn gold at sunset and read poetry aloud. I painted a piece I called Divergence. Two figures walking away from each other. One toward chaos, the other toward calm. One night Jason texted. Amy said yes. They wanted a small wedding in Lisbon. He asked if Isabel and I would help plan it. I smiled and said yes. I lifted my glass to the ocean and said, to truth and to the courage to face it. For the first time in a very long time, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was simply living honestly, solidly on real ground.